let's move on to our classic review theme. And tonight we're going to be doing two films by Gaspar Noé, and Billy Barraza is going to kick things off with his introduction to I Stand Alone. Do it, Billy.
This next nerd boasts the most extensive collection of Star Wars action figures on the show, but the ladies love him for his fantastic beard. Whip out your notebooks, because you know there's gonna be a quiz. It's Billy, the human thesaurus, Barraza.
Here's an old joke. A man goes to a psychologist and says, "Doc, I think I may be obsessed with sex." The doc says, "Okay, let's do a test." He draws a picture of a house on a whiteboard and he says, "What's that remind you of?" The guy says, "Sex." Then the doctor draws a picture of a tree. "What's that remind you of?" "Sex." And so the doctor draws a mailbox, car, clouds, and so on. Guy says, "Sex, sex, sex." Finally, the doctor says, "Wow, you really are obsessed with sex." Guy says, "What are you talking about? You're the one drawing all the dirty pictures on the board." Now, watching a Gaspar Noé film is like being stuck with that guy at a dance club at 3 a.m. while he's high. His pupils are dilated. He stares. He giggles. You wonder what he's on and if you should try some. Look closer. Somewhere in the black holes, to the back of his head, shapes are pulsing. You begin to discern tits, vaginas, assholes, semen, guns, brains on walls. Everyone is fucking. Everyone is high. Everyone is angry or crying. Everyone is dying. You know you want to fuck your mother, your sister, your dad. You want to fuck every hole in the world and die, right? Say it, say it. Hell, I'd like to see France's Bureau of Tourism hire Gaspar Noé to direct their marketing campaign. Come to Paris, city of lights and romance. Have an unwanted pregnancy? Need some special time with your daughter? France welcomes you. Gaspar Noé's I Stand Alone is a masturbatory knockoff of Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver, in that it chronicles a disturbed man's misguided sexual impulses and social alienation to a violent and uncertain end. Even the climax essentially takes the lingering question of Taxi Driver, that is, how much was only in Travis Bickle's head, and develops it into an actual split narrative. In a way, we're forced to choose our own ending. The man in question is the horsemeat butcher from Noé's earlier short film, Carne. As the film opens, he is just released from prison and shacked up with a Rubenesque harpy who's pregnant with his child. But he is not ready to be a father and lets her know in the least uncertain terms, then grabs a gun and heads for Paris. He spends the second act looking for work and drinking while his inner monologue drowns us in misanthropic vitriol. And let me say, it's nice to know the French can be as bigoted, racist, and fascist as any of us, thank you, Mr. Noé. The final leg of the film begins with an infamous title card, which is a nice gimmick, and then it's off permanently to Noé land, where the incest and bloodshed flow like milk and honey. Now, I confess, I keep coming back to Noé's films because he really does create a unique time and space with every film. They are reprehensible trash, yes, of course, but see Pauline Kael on that score. They are filled with phony, contrived pessimism, sure. They are also damned beautiful to look at, with a tone that is pitch perfect. But what I miss is humor. Like Lars von Trier's early work, I admire the schadenfreude here, the director's delight in making us uncomfortable, but maybe Noé crosses into mean-spiritedness at times, and won't allow his films to have a sense of humor about themselves. If he did, he might make even more interesting films. Now, guys, I don't know if you agree with me on that, but the thing that I come away with every time I watch one of his films is that he doesn't seem to have a sense of humor about them, or they don't have a sense of humor about themselves, maybe. But yeah, what do you guys think?
Well, you're so right. I mean, it's so obvious, to make that Taxi Driver parallel. And what makes Taxi Driver different from I Stand Alone is the humor. Is that there are so many times in Taxi Driver where, I mean, as horrific as something might be, there's comedy there for some reason. It's more human that way, I think.
Yeah.
And I definitely see that. Now, don't get me wrong. I dig what this dude is doing.
Yeah.
And I like I Stand Alone. And this is the second time I've screened this film. But, Billy, you're so right when you say there is and that's exactly what's missing from this film. It's a good film, but it could be a great film if he could find that inner humor in himself.
My problem is that there's a almost like a minimalist monotony to his films where it hits the same note nonstop from start to finish, right?
Right.
And so it has this weird effect of creating an alternate reality where that's the normal rhythm of the universe, right? But if he had more contrast, and like the great thing about Taxi Driver is that there's this alternate world where co-workers at a campaign location are trading wisecracks and stuff like that. Like there's alternate universes, you know. They go to the taxi drivers all hang out at the cafe, and there's like pimps from the other side of New York City, and you know, like there's alternate realities to contrast with this guy's descent into madness. In a Noe film, everyone behaves like the same. They're one character doing the same thing. You know, they all hit the same exact note over and over again. So it gets a little monotonous, but it's still in a weird way I can't quite explain. There's something magical about his movies. You know.
Yeah, I agree with you. Hey, listen, everyone. These are Dave's picks tonight. I want to let the listeners know, and Pace picked Manborg. Pace picked these two films. Let's hear what Dave has to say about I Stand Alone and the reason why he picked it.
Well, I picked it not because I think it's the best example of one of Gaspar's films, because it's not, but it's an interesting example of one of his films. I find it relentlessly bleak, and probably goes way the hell over the top in places, but it's probably unlike anything I've ever seen. I don't think I've seen a lot of films that look like it or play like that or have characters like the Butcher, right? I mean, it just doesn't happen. But Billy, you're quite right in some ways that these characters all kind of hit the same notes, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no normal in his world. You know, there's nobody out there just living a normal life. Everybody's sort of fucked up, right? And that's what I mean about it almost being relentless, right? It kind of hammers you down a bit.
There are so many opportunities, Billy, for him to find humor in this subject. I mean, he's got a bar scene which could just be full of characters. Everyone in there is pretty much just as angry as the Butcher.
Yeah.
You know, and as silent as the Butcher, except when they're angry, they just go off and start yelling.
Well, in the pro column, I mean, commenting on what Dave just said, Dave, you said that it's kind of relentless. That in a weird way, I think this kind of shows a way. This movie shows a way that Gaspar Noé's technique could actually work really good, in that the Butcher lives in his own head. So you're kind of in the movie, you're stuck in his head,
right?
And he only sees aggression everywhere. He only sees a threat everywhere. And so by the middle of the film, I was like, okay, this is sort of, you know, your standard Noé, like pessimistic worldview and all that stuff. But then as his monologue gets really crazy, it just goes off the rails.
But those are my favorite parts.
Yeah, it works, and all of a sudden it kind of kicks into high gear, and you go, aha, this actually works, because this really is how this guy sees the world.
Right,
you know?
right. Yeah, I could seriously, Billy, those are my favorite parts. I could just watch him walk around the streets of Paris for an hour straight and just listen to his thoughts.
That's what I was thinking when I was watching those parts. I was like, they must have spent like a week and a half just filming this guy walking around.
Yeah.
And the whole movie is an inner monologue. It's hilarious.
But those are the scenes where I get really lost, you know, in this film in a good way, you know, when I'm just listening to what's going on in his disturbed mind.
Yeah.
And, you know, and you're just kind of watching him just walk mundanely through life, and you just sense the anger. And you definitely, I mean, there's nobody on the streets.
Right.
You know, there's no one on the street. There's no one near him.
Right.
You know, and you can just get this feeling of isolation, which is great stuff by this director. Really great stuff. I assume, Billy, that the problem might be his writing, you know, the writing and his inability to develop interesting characters around his main character.
Well, it's kind of, I mean, the reason I used that joke at the beginning is because everything he does, he sort of it's like there's an assumed conclusion to everything. So it's almost like you're stuck in a tunnel. And he says this a lot. I mean, in in his interviews and stuff, that he views life like a tunnel that you can't get out of, and each of us is isolated from the other. And there's sort of a truth to that. But it's like part of the joy of cinema sometimes is in cross-cutting to something that is a complete contrast, because yes, you're in your tunnel, but you have to acknowledge that there are other people in other kinds of tunnels, and that's part of the fun.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's limited. I felt like in this movie, thematically, it kind of worked the best of the movies. I agree with Dave that it's not necessarily his best film, but thematically, the Noé style sort of has roots that run pretty deep in this movie, I feel. So.
Hey, Joe, I know your mouth is watering over here. You want to?
No, you know what? It's really interesting hearing you guys talk about this, and it's something that I actually didn't even consider as the lack of humor, though it makes absolute sense. But it's really interesting to compare it with Taxi Driver, as you guys were doing, and if you just compare scene to scene, the scene where Travis Bickle takes Sybil Shepherd, or I forgot her name in the movie, into the porn theater, and he thinks it's completely normal or whatever.
Tunnels have collided.
But here's
But let me continue. Just let me. So
Okay.
he in the Noy film, he goes and he's alone. So in the Bickles and Travis Taxi Driver, you have a point of reference. What ends up happening is you start to feel sympathy for Travis Bickle in a sense, because he's a bit of a buffoon and he's an outcast and a misfit, and he just doesn't get it. Where in the I Walk Alone, I Stand Alone, sorry, you don't get an outside perspective, so it just becomes really dark and depraved in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? Here's a theory, and again, just to what you guys were saying, is that humor is used in thrillers and horror movies and just generally dark films as a release, because it's very difficult to ask an audience to sustain that. And so what Noy doing, how do you say his name? Noah.
I heard him pronouncing it no way.
No way. So what he's doing, it's actually really a testament to his skill, is that he's keeping that keeping that level of intensity until that there is that release, and it all builds up to that final scene, right? So instead of giving you punctuating the film and letting you breathe every once in a while with a bit of comic relief like Scorsese does so well, he keeps that tension, he keeps you locked in that tension all the way into the end, and it charges that last scene and the interpretation of it and the release of that. It builds it all up so effectively. It's actually really well done, and it's nice to hear, just listen to you talk about the lack of humor, and that really just kind of brought that all to my head, right?
Yeah, I mean, to the issue of keeping it tightly controlled too, it's kind of doubly amazing because it took him a couple years to film this, and only sporadically because funding kept falling apart and stuff like that. So it's amazing that there's that pressure keeps up through the whole movie, and it's kind of like Eraserhead.
That is, there you go, Billy.
Yeah,
absolutely. Eraserhead was shut down.
Eraserhead was shot over like 7 years.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I mean, for a very long time. It's obvious to everyone here that he's a fan of Eraserhead. I know that he lists Eraserhead as one of his top 10 favorite films of all time. Joe, he also lists Salo as one of them as well.
I know. I watched an interview with him today, and it was amazing because he brought up Salo, and I was like, wow, the universe is getting smaller all of a sudden. And then he actually noted the same thing that I was sort of toying around with in my review, in that it's actually a moral film, and as depraved as it is on the surface, it actually ends up being a film that makes you feel better in a weird way, and that's really nurturing. I was just shocked to hear that. It was just very odd that all these things are coming together.
So Dave, you're taking this very tight, very intense, very dark journey with the Butcher. Gaspar's crossroad ending. Do you like what he's doing there?
At the end?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, you can't really say you like what he did there because it's really awful. But yeah, I mean, what impressed me about it was that he pressed on and went where I really just did not expect him to go. And you're waiting for it to stop, or you're waiting for something to happen and to like change it, you know, because you're just like, oh god, how's he getting out of this? Because now we're like really committed, you know. Now we're seeing shit that I'm just like, oh my god, I don't think I wanted to see this. And I think that was his only way out, you know. It was the only way to almost redeem himself, you know, at the end there was to just, you know, kind of, well, that didn't really happen. See ya.
Billy, you mentioned.
I-
Go on, Joe. Sorry.
I know I was
I
going to
love
ask.
that. I love that ending,
I,
by the way, Dave.
I feel like I
It's
need to
great.
watch some.
It's really great because it's just
Yeah.
like it's just fucking like torture, and you're like, oh my god, no, what are you doing? What are you doing? Oh fuck. And then it's just like, oh yeah, we didn't need to show you that.
It's well, it's open to interpretation too. Haneke.
Well, that's
Yeah.
what Billy.
Here's
that's
another
what,
guy.
Billy,
Well,
that's
I
what
was
you're
just gonna
saying.
ask, yeah.
I
He's-
didn't. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Tom. What?
I'm sorry, Billy. I didn't mean. I'm just so excited about your interpretation of the ending because you're saying that it's up to the viewer to decide which ending they want, and I was just getting it where he was just playing out that first scenario in his head.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, that's what I.
And if
I
that's the
think
case, I have big problems with the ending. But what
Huh.
you're saying, I could get into.
I think I could make an argument. I don't know how much of an intellectual type Gaspar considers himself, but I could argue that he's showing you that you're watching a film. You're not watching real life. So okay, so you see the scene, the horrible version A of events, and then you see version B of events. It doesn't matter. You as the audience, you've experienced that version A already.
Mhm.
So you know what I'm saying? He's saying it's just a movie, and your experience of that is as valid as if it really happened,
So you're
whether it did or not.
so you're thinking his mind frame is similar to Haneke that year with Funny Games.
The Funny Games remote control scene is the
Right.
one that I was kind
Right.
of keeping in mind there. Yeah.
I also remember the Miike film that we covered, the Ichiro, that reminded me of the way that
Ichiro. Man. You've
Ichiro.
been watching the Yankees too much.
I've been watching too much
Yeah,
baseball.
you gotta stop that, dude. Oh yeah, Ichi the Killer. Yeah, for some reason that movie popped. Oh, because I Enter the Void. That's why Ichi the Killer popped up in my head.
Oh no, but Ichi the Killer, there was an ending. Something happened at the ending
Right.
where it was really left ambiguous
Right.
at the end.
Mhm.
Because I had another read on this film, on this I Stand Alone, and what if his release, like the whole thing's a morality issue, right? Because he really wants to be having incest with his daughter or whatever, but he can't really work out the work out the morality of that, obviously. So in the end, if he kills himself, then there's no question of good or bad. He's free to go and do that with her, right? Is that? I mean, I don't know. I need to see. I actually feel like I
What
need
would
to see
that
the film
opening
again.
scene represent when there's a couple dudes talking in a restaurant and the guy says that his version of morality is in a handgun.
Right, because I guess if you kill yourself, then you're free of the tyranny of morality.
Right. So I mean that has to play into what happens at the end.
Yeah, I really need to watch. Both of these films that were, I watched 3 of Gaspar's films, and all 3 of them I feel like I need to watch again. Actually,
Did you get an opportunity to see Irreversible?
Yes, I did.
And that was the first time you watched it?
Yes,
See, I didn't get a chance to rewatch Irreversible. I mean, I've seen it. I saw it about 5 years ago, and I remember just watching it, and I loved it. And I'm like, but I can't go anywhere near this movie again. Was my feeling, because it just really just freaked me out so much. This guy obviously is an interesting dude. Joe, what else did you watch by him?
I watched these 3, these 2 that we talked about, and Irreversible. I actually think Irreversible was the best of the 3. Dave, what's your experience with Gaspar?
I guess it started probably with Irreversible. I saw Irreversible first and was really kind of blown away by it, and then I found I Stand Alone. And I wasn't sure if I ever wanted to see anything by him again. But I knew I would. I knew I had to, and then that's when I found his segment in Districted. For some reason, I was like, oh, I'm compelled to find like everything this guy's ever done. And then of course Enter the Void, which at the time I discovered him was just coming out in theaters, so I was like desperately trying to find a theater that was showing Enter the Void. But it was like It's this horrible obsession because it's awful stuff. But at the same time, it's like really oddly compelling. Yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah, it's weird because he has obsessions. I mean, his obsession is really the thing that is sort of the star of his movies, and it's his obsessiveness that carries them through. I mean, he's technically one of the most amazing filmmakers.
He's
Yeah.
incredible.
His three
Incredible.
films, the fact that I Stand Alone was made on such a shoestring over such a period of time, and it really has a tight visual style, you know, and it has
Yeah.
exactly the opposite of all the tricks that he used later, because he's the king of the gravityless camera, you know,
Yeah, it's
and
so amazing.
it's the most amazing thing ever. But you give him a tripod, and he'll still create something visually compelling the entire way through, you know, which is pretty impressive. But yeah,
That's all steady cam stuff, right, Billy?
in I Stand Alone,
Well, both of them, yeah. No, not I Stand Alone, and
in Enter the Void and
Irreversible and Into
Irreversible.
the Void.
Bill,
Yeah.
you're talking about like when the camera's still and then it just kind of like like flies towards a character quickly.
There's these. I mean, in Irreversible, there's a lot of steady cam
Mhm.
because you're just following the characters walking around a lot. In I Stand Alone, it's almost all on either a dolly or on tripod. There's almost nothing else. And then in Enter the Void, I don't know what the hell he was doing, but it's like in the opening scenes of Irreversible and the
Right.
ending too. The thing is just flying and floating through air. I have no idea how he's doing that. Like there's this cable system that I've seen them use in movies before that sort of suspends a camera and you can fly it around, you know, like it's on cables. Maybe he's doing that, but it's just amazing. I just don't know how he does that stuff.
I know.
You know?
I was marveling at it too. But in I Stand Alone, obviously the budget was a lot less, so he was restricted to his camera movements a lot. But I did notice that he did something sort of experimental, I guess, where the camera would pan or move forward really quick to the
And
sound
there'd be the
of
bullet sound, the
yeah, it's a
gunshot.
shotgun
Yeah.
sound or whatever.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, did that grate on anybody? I mean,
It got old. Yeah.
I found it interesting, and I listen whenever anybody does something like that, like Hopper was doing it a little bit with Easy Rider when we talked about that on the last episode, where they're just fucking with the form. I always applaud it. You know what I mean? Because it's just so easy to do regular cuts and everything. So even if it wears out his welcome, which I guess in both films I sort of felt the style kind of did that we're talking about tonight. But I mean, you gotta applaud a dude who's gonna stick to this
Well,
experiment.
and if
like that
if you're a
does,
person who feels worn out quickly by that kind of welcome, then Gaspar is not your director because he will have strobes on a scene for 20 minutes straight. He will. I mean, I guess since we're not reviewing it, Irreversible, the rape scene in Irreversible goes on nonstop, uncut for 9 minutes. Right? He does not have any compunction about wearing out his welcome at all. So he's a lunatic for that.
Yeah, well, he does remind me, Tom, of Haneke,
Of
like
course.
you had mentioned too, because he's always making you aware that you're watching a film. He doesn't care that you're not getting submerged in the drama or the story of it.
Well,
what I mean?
but the difference between the two, I think, is the fact is like Haneke is not fancy at all. I don't think so with the camera. He's just all about creating story through his characters. And I mean I don't see when I watch Haneke, I don't ever see anything really that flashy going on.
Yeah, the style's different, but I always feel like he's almost self-referential, or he's commenting on what he's filming while he's filming it in a way. I really need to revisit Haneke.
Well,
as
we'll definitely eventually do so. I know we've been saying this for like 30 episodes, but we'll definitely get to Haneke. Guys, like always with these directors, I don't want to throw everything into the first review about how we feel about these guys. So I'm going to go ahead and, unless anyone else has anything to say with about I Stand Alone, I'm going to go ahead and move on to our recommend, non-recommend deal.
I just want to say one thing and just throw this out there to you guys. Have you ever seen anything like what he did right before that end scene where he's like warning you have 30 seconds to get away to leave the theater?
No.
Isn't that
No,
Oh,
that
that was amazing.
That's I hate to say it. That's borrowed from an earlier movie.
Ooh.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Well, that's great, Billy. What movie do you remember?
I can't remember. I'll look it up online.
Is it American or foreign?
I don't remember what it was. I meant to put it on the Netflix queue and I forgot to do it.
Well, definitely investigate that, and we'll try to
Yeah.
maybe put it up on the website.
I'll do that.
All right, very cool. Let's start with Joe Christiana. Are we doing rent, buy, or avoid with I Stand Alone?
Oof, man. It's a great film. It's a really, really fascinating film. So it's a really healthy rental. I'm gonna rent it again. So if you would, I'm gonna rent it again. So I guess it would be an own if you're a DVD collector for sure.
I think that we're always saying that, Joe. All of us. It's like if you collect DVDs, buy a movie.
I know. Well, the thing is with these themes, there's thousands and thousands of movies out here, so we tend to pick films that are usually pretty good. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Billy, talk to me.
I'm gonna go. We're with the buy rent avoid system right now?
We're still rolling with that, dude.
Okay, I'm gonna go with a rent. There are a lot of people that absolutely revere this movie as one of the greatest, most shocking, whatever. And I was not quite I expected to be a little bit more shocked, and was not quite. So it's a rent for me. It definitely shows Gaspar's talent early on. And last but not least, the title card idea is lifted from a 1961 film called Homicidal, directed by William Castle.
Oh, you gotta love
Oh.
Billy Barassa, gentlemen.
William Castle. Wow, he's the Tingler dude, right? No, yeah, isn't he the dude who put the zappers in the movie theater seats
Oh my god!
back in the 50s,
I
right?
heard about that.
Yeah, the guy used to pack it like it was like a gimmick, like he would
Yeah.
electrify some.
He was the
Some of
king.
the seats.
That's right. He was the king of the gimmicks. He did like glow in the dark stuff and
Yeah, like skeletons in the
Yeah.
theater. But the best was when you gotta be a real fucking maniac to electrify seats in a movie theater and zap people like halfway through the movie.
Right. Yeah.
Fucking great.
And John Waters had the scratch and sniff thing too, right?
yeah,
God,
yep.
I can only imagine what the scent was.
Dave Pace, man, these are your picks, dude. So give me a rent, avoid, buy on I Stand Alone.
Buy it, freak out your friends.
Yeah.
It'll get you laid.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely true. Pace, I'm with you. I think this is a buy because, it's something. I like to lend things out. I love to lend movies out. I know that, there are some people on the show that it drives them crazy, like, you know who. But I love lending really good movies out. That's why I buy movies. I think this is something that could be bought, and it's a great film to turn people onto, man. On that note, let's stick with our good friend Gaspar, our classic review theme. We're done with I Stand Alone. We're moving on to his 2009 film, Enter the Void.